If I knew why that Bechstein piano cost only $200, I would have set it on fire right on the front lawn of that house, instead of hiring people to carry it to my apartment. I am a final year student at the New England Conservatory in Boston. For a classical music student, living in a cramped studio apartment in Allston, and having to practice on a cheap electronic keyboard is torture. I need the weight of mechanical keys. I need real resonance. So, when I saw the flyer posted on a utility pole about an estate sale in Brookline listing a 1,928 Bechstein upright, I caught the first bus there. The house was a huge but dilapidated Victorian architecture, nestled between modern villas. Inside smelled strongly of mothballs, dust, and something sweet, cloying like flowers left too long in an old vase. The piano lay in a dark corner of the living room. It was magnificent, but in a threatening way. Dark mahogany wood, nearly as tall as me, with deep scratches on the legs, as if someone had kicked it many times. When I opened the lid, the ivory keys appeared, yellowed like old teeth. I placed my hand on the keys. It was cold. Not the cold of an object in an unheated room, but a bone-chilling cold, as if I had just touched a block of dry ice. "Do you want to take it?" I started and turned around. An elderly woman, gaunt in black clothes, stood right behind me. She didn't look at me, but stared into the empty space above the piano. "It still plays well, right?" I asked, pressing my finger down on middle C. The sound rang out, deep and muddy. It was slightly out of tune, but the timbre was incredibly rich. It sustained in the air longer than any upright piano I had ever played. $200, she said quickly, her voice hoarse. "But you must move it today. That was a crazy price. A Bechstein of this era, no matter how beat up, should cost thousands of dollars." I thought I had found the bargain of a lifetime. I didn't notice the way she backed away when I took out my wallet, or the way she sighed in relief when the movers carried that heavy monster out the door. That night, after the workers left, my studio apartment seemed to shrink. The piano occupied a whole corner, its shadow casting long under the streetlight coming through the window. I wiped the dust off the lid with a damp cloth. Wherever the cloth wiped, the glossy wood appeared there. But that smell, the sweet, musty smell, still didn't disappear. It seemed to emanate from inside the piano case, creeping into every corner of the room. I closed the lid, feeling a chill run down my spine. The clock showed 11 p.m. I told myself it was just fatigue after a long day. But when I turned off the light and lay on the bed, I could swear I heard a creaking sound coming from the corner. Not the sound of wood expanding due to heat, but sounding like someone gently placing their body weight on the piano bench. Daylight is always the best sedative. The next morning, when autumn sunlight streamed through the window, the mahogany monster in the corner looked much more harmless. It was just an expensive antique that I was lucky to snag. I made a cup of black coffee, sat down at the piano bench, and decided to run through some Hanan exercises to test the piano's action. That was when I noticed the first oddity. The keys were terribly heavy. Usually, old pianos have loose or sticky keys, but this Bechstein was different. Every time I pressed my finger down, I felt a distinct resistance. Not spring force, but a feeling like elasticity. Like there was another finger underneath the key, pushing back against mine. I shuddered and pulled my hand back. "You're being paranoid," I muttered, my voice sounding weak in the quiet room. I tried to focus and play on. I was practicing Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor for my midterm exam. Powerful chords rang out, filling the tiny apartment. Its sound was too loud, too powerful for the size of an upright piano. It shook the wooden floor beneath my feet. And for a moment, I smelled that scent again. The overpowering smell of lilies, exactly like the smell at a funeral home, rushing straight into my nose, then vanishing as quickly as it came. I closed the lid earlier than planned. My fingertips felt numb, as if dipped in ice water. That night, I went to bed at 11:45. I remember clearly because I texted my mom bragging about the new piano. Silence blanketed Allston at night. Occasionally, only the sound of police sirens echoed from afar. My sleep was fitful, filled with chaotic dreams of blackened hands trying to open a coffin lid. I woke up, not gradually, but sat up immediately. My heart pounded against my chest. Cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. The room was pitch dark, only the eerie green light from the digital alarm clock on the nightstand. 3-7. Why did I wake up? I held my breath, listening. The air in the room thickened, heavy as if the pressure had suddenly changed. And then I heard it. Gong. A single musical note. Low, muddy. It rang out from the living room corner, where the piano stood. It wasn't the sound of a mouse running across the strings. Mice make clicking sounds. This was the sound of a hammer striking the string with intentional force, an A note in the lowest octave. My whole body went stiff. I lay still in bed, eyes staring into the darkness where the bedroom door was ajar, looking out into the living room. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling so much I felt ashamed. Silence. I reached out to turn on the nightstand lamp, grabbing the baseball bat I kept by the bed, a habit from living in a rough old neighborhood, and tiptoed out into the living room. The piano was still there, silent as a grave. The lid was still shut tight. I had checked carefully before sleeping. I remembered for sure I had closed the fallboard. I walked closer, my hand gripping the baseball bat wet with sweat. I touched the lid. It was still closed. But the wood right above the keyboard was warm, as if someone had been leaning their hand on it for a long time. Humans are best at deceiving themselves. The next morning, I convinced myself that the warmth on the piano lid was just my imagination, or due to heat accumulated from the heater. And the piano sound? Definitely a mouse. A fat mouse had crawled inside the piano case and ran across the bass strings. I even bought some mouse traps and placed them around the piano legs for peace of mind. The next 2 nights passed in silence. I started sleeping well again. My guard went down. That was a fatal mistake. The 3rd night, I was in a deep sleep when a sound tore through the night, dragging me up. Not a loud noise, but a repetition steady enough to be chilling. I opened my eyes. The alarm clock blinked the familiar green numbers again. 3, 7, ting, ting, tung, ting. It was no longer a random note. It was a C major scale, going up, then going down. But the way it was played was what made my blood run cold. It wasn't smooth. It was clumsy, hesitant, disjointed. The notes rang out with uneven intensity, some too soft, some slammed harshly. Imagine a child just learning to play. Or worse, imagine someone with severe arthritis trying to force their stiff fingers to obey. I lay motionless, staring blankly at the ceiling, listening to the piano echoing from the living room. Do, re, mi. Stop. The silence lasting 3 seconds. Then fa, sol. It was practicing. Anger flared up, overriding fear. I thought there was an intruder. Someone was messing with me in my own home. "Who the hell is that?" I screamed, grabbed the baseball bat and rushed out of bed, not bothering to turn on the light. I stormed into the living room, my finger slamming the light switch on the wall. The fluorescent light flickered, then blazed, exposing the tiny room. There was no one. The front door was still double locked. The windows were still shut tight, but I dropped the baseball bat to the floor. Thud. The Bechstein piano. Before sleeping, I had carefully closed the fallboard and covered it with a velvet cloth. I remembered very clearly. I have mild OCD with my instruments, but now the velvet cloth was lying crumpled on the floor, and the lid, that heavy mahogany lid, was wide open. I stood, rooted to the spot, 3 meters from the piano, chest heaving violently. The air in the living room was at least 10 degrees colder than the bedroom, and that smell returned, 10 times more overpowering. The smell of rotting lilies and formaldehyde, embalming fluid. It was so strong I felt a bitter taste in my throat, making me want to retch. I tiptoed closer, looking at the pale white keyboard. There were no mice, no automatic mechanisms. But when I looked closely at the middle C, D, E keys, they were still vibrating slightly, an undeniable physical oscillation. And on those glossy ivory keys, I saw a faint trace, a condensation trail, like someone's breath on glass, having the faint shape of fingertips. They were bigger than my fingers, and they were fading right before my eyes. I didn't dare sleep in the apartment that night. I spent the next day nodding off in the school library, and only returned home while it was still light. Fear had turned into a sickly obsession. I needed proof. I needed to know what was sharing my living space. On the way back, I stopped by Best Buy and bought a Wi-Fi connected Nest security camera. I installed it on the bookshelf, the lens pointing straight at the Bechstein piano. The angle covered everything: the keyboard, the bench, and the surrounding space. Then, I retreated to the bedroom, bolted the door, and pushed the wardrobe to block the exit. Night fell. The apartment sank into silence, but this time I didn't sleep. I sat with my knees drawn up on the bed, hands gripping the phone tightly, eyes glued to the camera app screen with the eerie green light of night vision mode. 3:06 a.m. My heart beat like it wanted to burst out of my chest. The phone screen displayed the silent living room in a ghostly gray-white tone. Grain danced on the screen. 3:07 a.m. On the screen, the fallboard slowly slid up. No hand touched it. It slid up smoothly, but through the phone speaker, I heard the dry, grinding sound of wood friction. And then the concert began. This time it wasn't scattered notes or warm-up scales anymore. A clear, gloomy melody rang out. I recognized it immediately. Any conservatory student would recognize it. Chopin's Piano Sonata No. Due pollice, B-flat minor. Op. 35. 3-0 movement. Marche funèbre. Funeral marche. But the way it was played. Oh God. I held my breath, pressing my eyes close to the 6-inch screen. The black and white keys depressed automatically to the rhythm. Dum, dum, da-dum. It didn't look like a ghost gliding hands over keys. It looked like a struggle. The rhythm was slow, painfully dragging. Chords often slipped, or notes stuck together, sounding very muddy. There were sudden pauses, as if the player had to stop, to massage painful hands before trying to press again. Through the black and white screen, I saw the piano bench sink slightly. The velvet cushion depressed, imprinting the exact shape of two gaunt, bony buttocks. A chill ran from my heels to the top of my head, not just from fear, but from a twisted pity. I was hearing the groans of a tortured soul through every musical note. I didn't dare turn off the phone, nor did I dare look away. The performance lasted exactly 4 minutes. At the final note, a deep, tragic chord, the lid slammed down with a crash so hard, the camera on the bookshelf shook violently and lost signal. The next morning, I found the camera lying face down on the floor. The memory card was still intact, but I didn't need to watch it again. That melody was etched into my brain. I pulled the crumpled receipt from the trash can. I needed to know who had owned this monster. Address: 42 Willow Street, Brookline. Owner Arthur Vance. I skipped morning class, sat in a coffee shop, and typed that name into Google. The first search results were obituaries. Arthur Vance died in 1994. I dug deeper into local newspaper archives. I found an old article in the Boston Globe from 1989 titled "The Silence of Golden Hands." Arthur Vance was a promising chamber pianist in the 72nds. He was famous for Chopin's nocturnes, but his career ended abruptly at the age of 40. The article read, Vance suffered from a severe, rare, and rapidly progressive form of rheumatoid arthritis. The disease turned his talented hands into twisted claws, stiff and agonizing with every movement. I read voraciously, a wave of nausea rising in my throat. The end of the article interviewed the former housekeeper, perhaps the woman who sold me the piano. He didn't accept the truth. He spent the last 10 years of his life locking himself in the room with the Bechstein. He was obsessed with playing the full funeral march to honor his late wife, but he never made it past the first page without stopping due to pain. I looked down at my own hands, trembling on the laptop keyboard. Arthur Vance died of a stroke right on that piano bench at 3 a.m. I closed the laptop. I understood. The heavy feeling and the pushback force when I played was not a broken spring. It was Arthur's stiff, painful hands still pressing on the keys, trying to finish the piece he could never complete. And last night, he played for me. I should sell it or throw it away. But when I got home, standing before the looming piano in the dark, a crazy and dangerous thought crossed my mind. If he wants to play, maybe he needs to borrow a pair of healthy hands. I made a mistake. I thought it was a romantic idea, helping a soul fulfill a wish. But I forgot a basic thing about dead things. They know no limits, and they are greedy. Thursday morning, I woke up, not because of the alarm, but because of pain. A bone-chilling pain ran from my 10 fingertips up to my elbows. I tried to make a fist to pull the blanket, but my fingers wouldn't obey. They were stiff, curled up like chicken claws. I looked down in panic at my hands under the morning light. My fingertips were bruised purple. Not bruises from impact, but subcutaneous hematoma caused by excessive and continuous compression pressure. The skin on my hands was red and swollen. I had slept heavily all night. I hadn't left the bed. But my body felt like it had just run a 10-hour marathon. I stumbled into the bathroom, ran hot water, and tried to massage my finger joints to loosen them. Crack. Crack. The dry, crunching sound of joints sounded exactly like the wood of that piano. In the mirror, I saw dark circles under my eyes. And worse, I felt a terrible mental exhaustion, as if part of my life force had been drained during sleep to feed something else. I walked out to the living room. The Bechstein piano still stood there, the lid closed. Closed by itself? But when I got closer, I saw reddish-brown faint smears on the ivory white keys. I swiped my finger to check. It was dried blood. Blood from my fingertips. Arthur didn't just play for me. He used me. While I slept, his spirit had controlled my hands, unconsciously, forcing them to play that damn piece over and over on the bedsheets, in the air. Or maybe I had actually sleepwalked out there without knowing. My pity evaporated completely, replaced by sheer terror. I can't let this go on. I need to sleep. And I need these hands to graduate, not to be a sacrifice for an arthritic ghost. I ran to the hardware store, bought a large plastic-coated chain, used for locking motorbikes, and a heavy-duty master lock. Back home, I closed the piano lid. I wrapped the chain around the piano body, tightening the fallboard to the lower body, locking the padlock tight. It looked crude, a masterpiece of art, bound like a wild beast, but I didn't care. "It's over," I said loudly, my voice trembling, as if to challenge the silence in the room. That night, I took 2 sleeping pills. I stuffed cotton in my ears. I blocked the bedroom door with both the wardrobe and the desk. I needed a peaceful night. But sleeping pills couldn't defeat the evil residing in the living room. 3:07 a.m. A earth-shattering crash rang out, strong enough to shake the floor and knock the water glass on my nightstand to the ground, shattering it. I shot up, heart wanting to jump out of my throat, sleeping pills still making my head spin, followed by the sound of metal straining. Clang. Clang. The sound of the chain being pulled to its limit, grinding into the wood. I heard the old mahogany groaning, cracking, then snap. It wasn't the chain breaking, it was the wood. The piano had broken its own wooden lid to escape. And then the music started again. This time, it was no longer a gentle piano sound. It was frenzied, furious. The keys were pounded so hard that the strings inside rang out with harsh, distorted metallic sounds. The funeral march was played at double speed, chaotic, like the scream of a madman banging his head against a wall. D-U-M, D-U-M-D, A, D-U-M. I covered my ears tight, curled up in the blanket, tears streaming down from fear. I could feel my fingers starting to twitch under the blanket, twitching to every frenzied rhythm out there. It was calling me out. I couldn't lie still and take it anymore. The piano sound outside now sounded like shattering bones mixed with snapping strings. Twang. Snap. Crash. With uncontrollably trembling hands, I grabbed the phone. The screen lit up blindingly in the darkness. I opened the camera app. Connecting circles spun. For 1 second. 2 seconds. Then the image appeared. The living room looked like a battlefield. The thick mahogany lid had been torn apart, sharp wooden shards pointing skyward like beasts' teeth. The iron chain I bought in the afternoon was thrown aside, twisted, and there was something sitting on the piano bench. It was no longer a blurry shadow like the day before. The infrared camera caught the clear shape of a man wearing a tattered old 90 seconds tuxedo. His back was bent double, so gaunt that the spine protruded through the thin fabric. But the hands. Oh God, those hands. That was not human hands. They were elongated, black as burnt dry branches. The knuckles were swollen grotesquely, big as golf balls wedged under thin skin. Those fingers didn't glide on the keys. They stabbed down. Every press was torture. I saw his whole body convulse every time he struck a chord, as if pain shot from hands straight to brain. He was playing with hatred, and he needed to replace those ruined hands. Suddenly, the music stopped dead. The shadow on the screen slowly turned its head. A pale, gaunt face, with 2 deep black hollows for eyes staring straight into the camera lens. He had no mouth. The skin where the mouth should be was sewn shut with crude black threads. He knew I was watching. My phone screen glitched and then went dead. The camera was destroyed. The very next second, the streetlights outside the window also flickered out. Absolute darkness enveloped the apartment, thick and cold. Click. The sound of my bedroom door latch popping up. I held my breath, backed into the corner, gripping the box cutter I grabbed from the desk. The wardrobe I used to block the door began to vibrate. Creak. Creak. Someone outside was slowly pushing the door in. Its strength was terrible. The heavy oak wardrobe began to slide across the floor, creating an ear-piercing friction sound. But the most terrible thing wasn't what was coming in, but what was on me. My two hands. They started hurting violently, a pain chilling to the marrow like an electric current running through. And then, they moved on their own. I watched in horror as my left hand threw the box cutter to the floor. My right hand reached out, grabbed the edge of the wardrobe, and began to pull. My body wanted to flee, but my hands, the hands of a pianist, were betraying me. They wanted to open the door. They wanted to go out there. They wanted to touch those cold ivory keys. Stop! Stop it now, I screamed, using my whole body weight to pin my hands, trying to force them to the floor. But my fingers were absurdly strong. They clawed at the wooden floor until the fingernails bled, trying to drag me towards the opening door. Through the 10 centimeters gap, a pungent stench rushed in, the smell of rotting flesh and wilted lilies. And I saw Arthur Vance's long, black, multi-jointed fingers slipping through the crack, beckoning me. Come here. Give them to me. I didn't hear a voice, but that thought rang in my head, clear as a jarring musical note. The bedroom door burst open completely. The wardrobe crashed to the floor, creating a cloud of dust. Arthur Vance stood there. Up close, he looked even more terrible than on the camera screen. The smell of death was so pungent my eyes stung. He didn't walk, but glided with jerky movements, like a puppet with tangled strings. He didn't attack me. He just stood aside, pointing at the wrecked piano in the corner. Play. My hands, now swollen and purple, curled up like pincers, dragging my whole body, crawling on the floor towards the piano. I screamed, trying to dig my feet into the floor to break, but it was useless. The invisible force controlling my hands was greater than any muscular effort of mine. I was dragged to the piano bench. Arthur bent down, his mouthless face close to my ear. I heard a rasping rattle from his throat, the sound of dry cartilage and trachea rubbing together, forming a suffocating melody. Dum, dum, dum. My body was lifted and thrown hard onto the piano bench. Immediately, my 10 fingers lunged at the keys like hungry beasts. Pain exploded in my skull. Every time my finger pressed down on the cold ivory key, I felt like someone was driving nails into my fingertips. Fresh blood sprayed from under my fingernails, staining the white keys red. I was playing the funeral march, but it wasn't me playing. It was Arthur playing through me. He stood right behind me, skeletal hands placed on my shoulders, transmitting a bone-chilling cold into my heart and lungs. I cried, tears mixed with snot running down my chin, but my hands still ran wildly over the keys. Faster, stronger than anything I had ever practiced. My finger bones started cracking. Snap. The right index finger broke, but it continued to hammer down on the keys. I knew I was dying. If I played this piece to the end, my heart would stop, just like Arthur's 30 years ago. This piano didn't just drink blood, it drank life itself. At the crescendo, Arthur threw his head back, his body shaking violently in sickly pleasure. The pressure on my shoulders loosened a bit. This was the only chance. I mustered all my remaining sanity and bit down hard on my tongue. The metallic taste of blood and the sharp pain helped me regain control of my body in a split second. Instead of pressing the next chord, I braced myself, let out a gut-wrenching scream, and slammed both fists down on the keyboard. Bam! A chaotic, jarring sound rang out, breaking the ghostly melody. Arthur froze, looked down at me, his black hollow eyes widening in rage. I didn't wait for him to react. I sprang from the bench, lunging straight for the living room window. I didn't have time to unlatch it. I curled up and threw my whole body through the glass. Crash. The glass shattered, cutting into flesh, but I felt no pain. I tumbled onto the iron fire escape, cold rain whipping my face. Inside the apartment, the piano started again, but this time it roared. I heard thudding footsteps rushing towards the window. I scrambled down the fire escape, slipped on the last few steps, landing hard on my back. I scrambled up and ran. I ran barefoot on the soaking wet asphalt of Alston, running until my lungs burned, and I collapsed in front of a 24-hour convenience store 3 blocks away. The clerk called 911 when he saw me. A madman covered in blood, hands crushed, mouth babbling. Apologies to Chopin. That was 6 months ago. I dropped out of the conservatory. Actually, I had no other choice. The doctor said the nerve damage in both hands was permanent. I would never be able to play the piano professionally again. My fingers are now crooked, scarred, and constantly trembling. I moved to Maine, working the night shift at a call center. I stayed away from everything related to music. I didn't listen to the radio, didn't watch TV, even covering my ears when passing shops with speakers playing music. About the Bechstein piano? The landlord said when he cleaned the apartment, he found it had been smashed to pieces from the inside, as if a bomb had exploded inside the case. He carted that pile of debris to the city dump. I thought I had escaped. But lately, a new habit has started to appear. Every night, while I was manning the phone or trying to sleep, at exactly 3:07 a.m., my hands would start tingling. A dull, familiar pain radiated from the healed fractures. And no matter how hard I tried to hold back, my fingers automatically tapped on the table surface. Thumb, index, middle. They tapped the funeral march rhythm. Last night, in a daze, I looked down at my hand. Under the dim streetlight casting into the room, I saw the shadow of my hand cast on the wall. But that shadow was not my hand. It was elongated, gaunt, and those black fingers were dancing joyfully. Arthur never left. He didn't need the piano anymore. He had my hands now,